Now this idea of choosing a subset of objects out of a larger set and figuring out how many ways we could arrange this subset in particular orders, a permutation, is something we do quite frequently, and it just so happens that technology, in the form of our calculator, has the ability to do this for us. Let's say I want to find the number of ways to group 4 objects out of 7. Well, I pull out my calculator and I start with the 7 objects I'm working with in my set. Then I go into the math menu and I work my way over to the PRB, which is short for probability. And you'll notice that this second option here, number 2, NPR, the P stands for permutation. So I'll select the permutation. And then I will say how many objects I'm using out of the 7. So in this case, 4. And if I hit enter, I get 840. And that's how our permutation option works. You'll also notice in the math probability menu, option 4 here, the exclamation point or the factorial symbol. So if I wanted to use that and I wanted to know what 5 factorial is, that would be 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So I could just go in and ask for 5 factorial. You might have tried doing this in your head before you actually see what happens on the screen. 120. Now we found that 7 P4 from our calculator was equal to 840. Let's figure out how we arrived at that number. We think we're choosing 4 objects out of a possible 7. So my first choice, for my first slot, I have 7 choices, then 6, then 5, then 4. So I get 20 times 6 is 120, times 7 gives me 840. So what is a nice succinct way to figure out that that's what we have to do? Well, you'll notice that we have the beginnings of a factorial here. If I extended with the final 3 slots, 3, 2, 1, then I would have 7 factorial. But I don't. I only have up to 4. So I need to figure out a way to get rid of those last 3 slots. So if I divided by those last 3 slots, then I could talk about this calculation in terms of factorials. You'll see that this fraction here is 7 factorial over 3 factorial. Well, the 7 factorial, the 7 comes from the number of items in my original set. The 3 factorial is the items that I'm not choosing out of the 7. So that 3 factorial, here's my original set as the numerator, and my denominator is the not chosen portion of my set. So one way to calculate if we use the values from our original situation, the original would be n. If you looked in our calculator, it was NPR. So n factorial, and to figure out what's not chosen, we could take the set minus what we actually chose. So n minus r would give me the leftovers. And we take the factorial of that. So the algebraic calculation for a permutation of a selected subset from a larger set is this formula here. N factorial, which is the number of items in the set, divided by n minus r factorial, the number of items that weren't chosen to be included in the permutation. So let's recap. What is the defining characteristic of a permutation? Well, it's the point that order matters in the arrangement. What are some key words that indicate permutations? Things like and or in a row. How do you calculate permutations of a limited number of objects from a set manually? Well, laying out the number of slots, as we did in the first example, and working our way through the slots as our choices become more limited. How do you calculate permutations of a limited number of objects from a set with your calculator? We go into the Math menu, go over to the Probability area, and use the NPR option. What is a factorial, and what is its mathematical notation or symbol? A factorial is the product of all the numbers from 1 to a certain number, and its mathematical notation is an exclamation point. What is the mathematical formula for calculating permutations? Well, the formula is n factorial over n minus r factorial, where n stands for the number of objects in the set, and r stands for the number of selected objects from that set.